Okay, so our next presenter is Jan, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this, and I'm sorry, JAN KAREL PIETERSE. Jan has been designing spreadsheets since 1988. He's a self-employed consultant who specializes in trainings, consulting, and custom solutions in Excel and VBA. He has also been a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional since 2002. So we're very excited to have you, Jan. Welcome. Let's get started with the video.
Hi there. Welcome to my presentation on Excel Virtually Global 2023. Today I'm going to present a number of Excel add-ins that will make your life a lot easier. My name is JAN KAREL PIETERSE. I'm an Excel and VBA expert, and here you can find my website and LinkedIn address and email. So why would you add tools to Excel? Because Excel has a plethora of options to help you with your daily task. Well, I came up with 3 important reasons. When the built-in functionality is too limited for your purpose, when the functionality you're looking for is not there in Excel, and the last one I could come up with is when you want to improve your efficiency in your daily task with Excel. There are different types of add-ins. The oldest one is the VBA add-in. Those are files with the extension XLAM. You access those add-ins by opening the add-ins dialog from the file options. That dialog looks like this. Another older type of add-in are the .NET type add-ins, also called COM add-ins. Those you access by going into File Options and then selecting COM add-ins from the list and clicking Go. And the last and most modern one are the Office JavaScript add-ins, currently called Office add-ins. So let's start talking about my add-ins first. And you can access those add-ins by going to my website. Here's my download page, and I invite you to scroll through this to the page because there's loads of interesting stuff in here, like my FlexFind add-in, which we're talking about today, my name manager, and loads of other stuff. First of all, let's talk about FlexFind. FlexFind was first published as a macro on the Excel Experts e-letter from 1999. That e-letter contained posts by Tom Ogilvy, Steve Bullen, John Walkenbach, and a lot of other Excel gods, and then finally myself. FlexFind actually came about because someone asked on a forum that they wanted to search for a string across a number of worksheets. And at the time, the Excel Find dialog did not have the within dropdown, as you see highlighted in red here. So you were only able to do searches within one sheet at a time. So that is why I created my Find It All macro, which I published on the Excel Experts e-letter back in 1999. When Excel 97 came out, the within dropdown was added to Excel, and I needed something more to make my FlexFind stand out from the crowd. And that was when I discovered that Find doesn't do any objects, so it doesn't find anything in conditional formatting, data validation, charts, controls, and pivot tables. So rather than talking about all this stuff, let's do a small demo. Here I have my workbook, which I always load to demonstrate my FlexFind utility. And after installing FlexFind, on the Home tab on the far right, you will find this icon here. So let's click that FlexFind button and search for 123. Make sure it looks in Objects and in the VBA and click Find. And as you can see, it already found it in various objects, for example, in validation and conditional formatting. And one thing that FlexFind does is if you click on an item, it tries to select the cell or the object in question. If it doesn't move, it means it's the same cell. As you can see, it says G6 here and it says G6 here as well. That is because we're looking at 2 different conditional formatting rules where the item was found. So apart from the format conditions, which there are a lot of here, it also finds your text in notes, as in this cell. As you can see, it contains the text test 1, 2, 3, so it found the 1, 2, 3. Now you may wonder why it doesn't find any of the 1, 2, 3s on this chart, but as it happens, all of the texts in this chart are pointed to cells. And since none of the formulas contain 1, 2, 3, it doesn't find them. If I were to let FlexFind look for example, $D dollar, $D dollar, it should find this chart title. Let's try that. $D dollar, find. And as you can see, it found it in the chart title right here. If I double click on this list, it'll place the formula below and highlight the section in the formula, like this. Let me do the 1, 2, 3 again and demonstrate that it also finds in VBA. And notice if I click an item in the FlexFind dialog, it's going to highlight that hit in the code, like it does here. So let's do a replace. Let's replace all of these 1, 2, 3s with 4, 5, 6. So let's do a replace. First we select all items in the list because we want it to run through all the items, and we'll click replace. And the first thing it asks is whether we want to replace the 123_1 in the cell validation formula. So let's just do that. And let's continue doing that for all of the validation items that it finds. And notice how we can click yes to all as well. Now, if we have a function, now suppose we have a formula that contains multiple hits of the 1, 2, 3. You'll notice that you get prompted for each of them. So notice how it first asks for this 1, 2, 3, and subsequently will ask for that one. So that gives you a lot more control than Excel's replace option, because that replaces all of the hits in the formula at once. Same happens here. And we can even do a replace in the query string of a query. And here we're replacing that 1, 2, 3 in VBA code, and the 1, 2, 3 in this part of the line, and the 1, 2, 3 in that part of the line. So as you can see, it hasn't replaced all of the 1, 2, 3s in the selections that I made. This is due to the fact that FlexFind has just had an update where I've added the color scale data validation and the data bars, but I have not yet updated the replacements option of those. So that's why those aren't working yet. So yeah, there you have it. FlexFind. It's a tool that makes it really, really easy to do replacements in Excel, especially if you have, for example, many charts with titles that look alike and where you need to replace some content in the title by something else, like, you know, a company name or maybe a date or something like that. Next add-in on my shortlist is Name Manager. Name Manager came about by a question on the CompuServe forum back in September 2002. There was a chap that said, I'm sick of this tiny Excel window to manage names. Notice that this was back in the day where Excel 2000 was still the mainstream Excel version. So now you know that my name manager was conceived back in 2002. Let's have a look at what it looks like and what it's capable of. So I've opened a demonstration workbook which contains loads of Excel names, and I'll show you by opening the built-in name manager of Excel. As you can see, there's a lot of them. So this name manager is actually based off of our name manager. So let me show that instead. So when you install Name Manager, there's a couple of buttons that you get here. And this is the button that launches Name Manager. So one thing that immediately stands out is that we have loads more filters here. And we can combine filters and use and or even invert them. Loads of stuff here, probably more than you'll ever need. One of the things I use, the filters I use most are the ones like these. Names with external references. As you can see, there are only 2. Names with errors. There's probably more. Yeah, there's a number of them. And this one's important to note. Excel actually adds its own names with errors to any workbook. As soon as you use worksheet functions, which are relatively modern, more modern than Excel 2007, Excel will automatically add those functions as range names. And this is for backward compatibility reasons. To filter out those types of range names, just click on the Options button here, the Settings button, and remove the checkbox next to Show Excel System Names. That will effectively hide them from the dialog, as you'll see. Other filters include the scope of the name. So suppose you want to see only names that are local to any worksheet. Then you just click this one. Hidden or visible range names. Apparently there's no hidden range names in this file. Right, so if we want to do anything with the range names, the buttons up here are important. So this closed eye gives you the indication that you can hide the selected name. If you select more than one name, you can hide all of them in one go or make them all visible in one go. The icons are courtesy of my friend Charles Williams, by the way. So if I click hide, it's going to hide those names and they'll disappear because I have it filtered by visible names. So if I now click on hidden, you'll see the same names I just hid become visible in this list again because it's now filtered for hidden range names. So let's unhide these names and they'll disappear from this list again. A feature I use a lot is the list feature, which when clicked adds a worksheet to the workbook with all of the range names inside. And once it's done, it'll pop up a message box. And you can close the dialog and it will have a new tab here containing all of the range names in a single table. And the beauty of this is that you can actually edit these. Let's just add a 0 here and a 0 there. And then once you're done editing, you can open up the Name Manager dialog again and then tell it to pick up the changes from the list. Let's select the names I want to modify, these 2, and click OK. And you should see both update. So if we look here, you can now see that answers.product here is pointing to A10, whereas answers.sector name is pointing to B10. An interesting thing is, if you're editing a name, Name Manager will detect whether you're editing a relative name or an absolute name. So if you look at this name's address, you can see that there's no $sign in front of the 10. So Name Manager notices that we're editing a relative name and it's going to first ask us for the anchor cell. So are we going to be editing that name relative to this cell here? Let's just click OK. And now I can edit the name. I'm going to remove the 0, press enter. It's going to ask to update the name. And there we are. It's just updated the name. And let's do the same for this one. It's going to ask for a cell reference again. I'll just click OK, remove the 0, press enter. Yes. So that's another way to edit range names. Another very useful feature is the highlight button. So let's just click the highlight button. I don't want it to just do the selected names because then it's only going to highlight this name. I want it to do all of them. Let's get rid of previous highlights. So once it's done highlighting, you can close the name manager window, and you can see that it placed boxes on top of all of the cell ranges that contain a range name. So if I scroll down, you can see the actual name appear here. And as you can see, there's a range name here that's not actually pointing to all of the cells in this column, which might be a problem. So you can click this button to get rid of the highlights again. Another very useful feature is the button that finds out whether the selected name is used in your spreadsheet anywhere. So if you click that one, it's going to do find in all of the objects and formulas in Excel. And as you can see, the name answers.sector name is used in a number of places. It's used in this formula here, and in this area, and all of these. And if you click on them, it's going to select the area where that name has been used. So this is quite a useful feature if you want to find out where you're actually using your range names. Name Manager contains that many features that it probably will be pretty boring if I talk through all of them. I encourage you to download Name Manager. So head over to my website and go to this URL and download my Name Manager from here. The next add-in I wanted to talk to you about is my ref tree analyzer. That is a tool that makes it easier to trace precedence, dependence, and it got loads more stuff in there. Ref tree analyzer is a commercially sold application, but if you download it, you can download it for free, and it has a demo mode which features most of its capabilities totally free. If you look at Excel's built-in formula auditing capabilities, you're stuck with the trace precedence arrows and the trace dependence arrows. And they're, to be honest, a bit limited. For example, look at this formula. We're looking up information from cell F3 in the table prices, widgets columns, and we're returning the price column. So if we were to trace precedence, what we would end up with is just this. A direct arrow pointing to the F3 cell and a dashed arrow here with a tiny table icon here. Not many people know that you need to actually double click this arrow to get the go-to box so that it enables you to go to the cell where the formula is pointing to. And as you can see, it has two ranges pointing to other sheets, the column A of the data tab and column B of the data tab. Notice how in this go-to dialog, the structured references have been replaced by cell addresses. So that makes it even harder to track which item in this go-to box belongs to which item in this formula. Moreover, it frequently happens if you have a longer file name or maybe a long tab name that these addresses disappear out of view. You actually have to click in the reference box here and scroll to the right to see the actual cell addresses. So in comes my ref tree analyzer, which I have already installed on all of my computers. And you just click precedence here. And then this dialog pops open. And once the dialog is open, you can use the down arrow key to scroll through the different cell addresses in the formula. And notice how it highlights the item in the formula up here too. And at the same time, it highlights the cell in question, in this case cell F3. And if I click down arrow once more, it's going to highlight the widget column in the prices table and the price column in that same prices table. And notice how it's highlighted here as well. And finally, and I think beautifully, if the formula in question yields a range, it will give you this formula points to item in the tree. And if you click that, it's going to highlight the cell that this formula actually is getting the value from. So that is tracing cell precedence. So here we see both the precedence and the dependence of cell F7 here. So F7 uses cell F3, the widgets table, and it also gives its result to cell F8, which is calculating turnover, which of course is price times amount. Now, remember how I clicked the precedence button on the formulas tab here and how it displayed like this? Well, Ref3 Analyzer also has a visualization button, which works similar to the trace precedence button, but it gives a lot more information. For example, it shows you that the formula in this cell is actually taking values from a range that looks like this. And if you click on that little box, it's going to take you to that range. And you can see that one of the arguments of the formula is actually this column. And if we click on that column again, it's going to take us back to the formula in question. And the other range that the formula is taking values from is this one. And we can click here to go back again. And finally, the first argument of our formula is pointing to this cell. Suppose that this formula is pointing to cell F30 rather than F3. As you can see, 30 is outside of the viewable area. Ref3 Analyzer takes that into account, and when you click Visualize, it will show the content of cell F30 here so that you can see it. And if you click here, it's going to take us to F30. And if we click here, it's going to take us back to the formula cell, like that. Of course, we also provided a button to get rid of all these arrows and stuff. It's the clear arrow button here. And it's removed, and it just removes all of the arrows. It also automatically gets rid of all the arrows when you save the file. One thing that Excel's built-in trace dependence does not do is look at objects in the spreadsheet. So, for example, this chart here has a series that is pointing to these cells over here, but there's no arrows from the charts to the cells. So if you go to Ref3 Analyzer and click on the Object References button, you'll see that it found the chart that I mentioned just now, and you'll see that it has detected that the series 1 is pointing to these cells. And as you see here, it looks through loads of stuff. To be honest, I stole this code from my FlexFind utility, of course. And if we just show 2 levels in this tree, we can better see what we have. For example, on the pivot table sheet, in cell C4 to C6, we have spark lines, and the spark lines take their values from cell B4 to B6. And notice how there's a checkbox here. And when I click checkbox, it highlights the checkbox here. And when I click on the cell reference, it actually puts the dashed lines around the cell that the checkbox is using. Same goes for all the other controls. If I click on the control, it's going to highlight the control or select it, like you see here. And if I expand this and click on linked cell, it's going to highlight that cell, which is this one. Notice how it also does validation formulas. So this cell contains the validation formula, and to prove that, I'll just show you the validation rule of this cell. You see we have a validation rule that says that the start date must equal H4 and the end date must equal J4. Another very important feature, at least I think so, is the detection of circular references. I've opened up a file that contains circular references, so let's just click OK to make sure that we can look at the file, which is right here. Now, if you go to Excel's Formula tab and look at the error checking, it's going to tell you that we have a circular reference, and those are the red arrows that you see here. It's going from E13 to G11 to E9 to C11. What Excel doesn't tell you is that there are actually 2 more circles here. we have a circle spanning these yellow cells, and we have another circle spanning these yellow cells. And because these cells are intertwined, we in fact have not just 3 circular references, but in fact we have a whole web of circular references. So let's start our circular reference tracing button. And because this is going to make changes to the file, it offers to create a backup copy before it starts. We don't need that because this is a demo file. So as you can see, Ref3 Analyzer detected 3 circles, and if we click on the circle items here, you'll see the circles in question highlighted, including all of their reference arrows from the trace dependents and trace precedents. And if we expand the circle, we can see which cells each circle comprises. And this is all very, very keyboard friendly. All I'm using currently is the arrow key. So I'm doing right arrow to expand the circle, and then down arrow to go to the references, or the up arrow. The tool is by default hiding cells that refer to themselves. For example, if you want a cell to keep a value, then a trick some people use is by letting the cell refer to itself using an if statement. You can remove that check and see if there are any cells, but there aren't. So Ref3 Analyzer isn't just about references. It's also about helping you create documentation. For example, it has a table of contents button. And this feature automatically checks for all of the different objects that you have in your file that it's capable of creating a table of content for. So this demo file contains all of the objects that we can add as a table of content item. So as you can see, it does sheets, tables, external links, pivot tables, charts, and controls. The tool also enables you to set a tab name for the table of content. And finally, you can add a reference to the table of content on every worksheet. So let's do that and click OK. So once it's done, here you have your table of content sheet. And it starts with the sheets, then the external links. And notice how if a link isn't found, it colors the cell red. It has all of your tables too, and a link to each table. So if you want to know where your data 1 table is, or table data 2, you just click on the link here and it'll take you to where that table is. A simple F5 enter takes us back to this list. And for example, if it is a pivot table, it gives you both the location of the table and the location of the source data if there's source data. Same goes for charts. It tries to give you the source data for a chart, but only if it's a pivot chart. And finally, controls give you more information like the link to the control itself. Let's go back. The location of the linked cell and the source. For those of you who were paying attention, we also have a remarks column in every table. This remarks column is remembered when you click the table of content button again. So for example, let's just place a remark here. Let's do another remark at the external pivot tab. Let's just move that tab a bit. Put it here. So external pivot now is after the data 1 tab. So let's click that table of content button again, and we should see the remark 2 move downwards along with the external pivot reference. Takes a bit. And there you can see that remark 2 has sticked with the external pivot entry on the table. So this tool makes it very easy to create a starter for your documentation for a spreadsheet, because you can simply click the button, it will list all of the things that are in your workbook, and that gives you space to add remarks to each and every item so that you can explain what the item is for, and you'll never have to worry that your remarks are going to, be reshuffled and go out of place. So that's table of content, and we have all sheet statistics. If we click that, it'll give you a list of all kinds of statistics about the worksheets. such as the used range of the sheet, how many cells with conditional formatting, how many with data validation, how many formulas, empty cells, and maybe most importantly, the calculation time for that worksheet. So that if you have a model that calculates slowly, simply click the All Sheets button, and you can then sort this table from largest to smallest and have the slowest worksheet at the top. I think that's enough talk about my RefTree Analyzer utility. There's more functions here that you can use, but I'm not going to speak about them today. What I am going to speak about is the time-limited offer that we're offering this week. So, especially for Excel Virtually Global 2023, I'm offering a 50% off of my RefTree Analyzer licenses. Simply go to the purchase process and enter this coupon code. Remember to do this before October 14, or otherwise the coupon code will no longer be valid. Because I see a lot of people struggle with installing VBA add-ins, I've added a little instruction to this video. Installing an add-in is not much more than downloading the file containing the add-in, unpacking the zip file to a folder if it's a zip file, unblocking the add-in file, and install it using Excel. And let me take FlexFind as a demonstration. So here's my downloads folder, and the file I downloaded is called flexfind2007.zip, and I'll click on that, and it will show the content of that file. So let's copy these files to my desktop, like this. We can get rid of this now. So the FlexFind file, the actual add-in, is called flexfind.xlam. We need to unblock that file. So we right-click it, select Properties, and then tick this Unblock box and click OK. If you want to use the setup facility which comes with FlexFind, do the same for this one. Setup FlexFind. Properties, Unblock, OK. So installing FlexFind can be done using two methods. You can double click this file here, then enable content, and click the Setup FlexFind button. It will automatically install FlexFind. But I also wanted to show you the manual way. So you open up Excel, make sure there is an empty workbook in Excel open. Go to File, Options, click on the Add-ins tab here, and select Excel Add-ins and click the Go button. Now, because my add-in is on the desktop, it doesn't automatically show up here, so I'm going to click Browse, go to the desktop, click flexfind.xlam and click OK, and you should see it appear here. And then once I click OK, FlexFind is going to show up on my Home tab on the far right here. Click OK. And there's my new VBA FlexFind button. There you are. As a final part of this presentation, I also wanted to shortly show you my FlexFind Office JavaScript edition. So setting up an Office JavaScript add-in is slightly different from VBA add-ins. They come in the Microsoft Store, and you access that store from the add-ins button, which on this version of Excel is right here on the Home tab, but it might also be on your File tab here, Get Add-ins, or with some older versions on the Insert tab somewhere around here. So let's click the Add-ins button, click Get Add-ins, look for FlexFind, add it to my Excel, continue, and there's FlexFind, and let's search for 123. And there we are. It finds 123 on the sheet in various cells. It finds it inside a comment, this comment over here, and it also finds it in the reply to the comment, which is this one here. And this even works in Excel Online. So here's Excel Online. Here's the same file in Excel Online in the browser. Click Flex Find. It opens up. I search for 1, 2, 3, and it finds all of them here, similar to the other one. So that was my add-ins presentation. I've shown you my FlexFind add-in, the VBA version, which you can find using this URL. I've shown you my FlexFind JavaScript edition, which you can add by clicking that add-ins button, which is either on your Home tab or your File tab, or maybe even your Insert tab, which has a help page that you can see here. Then I've demonstrated my Name Manager add-in, which is really useful if you have lots of range names. And finally, I've shown you what my ref tree analyzer is capable of, which you can find using this URL. I'm offering a 50% off using this coupon code, which is valid until October 14th. And now for the required last slides. Evaluations. It's always important to have feedback. So scan this QR code or visit that link and tell us what you thought about my presentation. If you're interested in helping shaping the future of Excel, scan this QR code and fill in the form. And then finally, my details. There's my website, my LinkedIn address, my email, and my company name for anyone who's interested in contacting me for VBA or Excel development. Get hold of me. Thank you for listening to my presentation and have a great day.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Jan. We now have a couple of questions, I think, in the chat if you want to hop online to answer them. Thank you for the presentation. Let's just jump straight into the questions. First question, what version of Excel was that done in? Was that example done in?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's not necessarily about the demo file that I was showing on screen with all the 1, 2, 3s inside. If it was, that demo file has been done in a plethora of Excel versions because it goes way back to Excel 97 or something. And I've been adding tabs to that sheet as new versions of Excel came out with new capabilities like Power Query and, new kinds of conditional formatting. And I wanted to, needed that as material to actually try out new stuff that I was adding to the add-ins.
Cool. Okay. A question from TC. Hi, Jan. How can we ensure security when using the add-ins?
Good question. There's always many sides to security, of course. I think one of the first things is to be sure that the file you're downloading is actually the file originating from me. So to that end, for important add-ins, I use a code signing certificate to sign the VBA code that is in the Excel file, so that if you open the add-in, you'll be able to detect whether the code inside the add-in is mine. I'm not sure if I can actually demonstrate that here.
Yeah, you're welcome to share your screen. Just a moment. It should be popping. There we go. Yep, it should be on the screen now.
Yeah, so if, for example, if you open that ref tree analyzer add-in file directly from, like Explorer or something, you'll get this pop-up automatically. And it's going to tell you that this file contains a signature. And you can show the signature details here and then see that that's actually my signature. So that's one way of finding out whether a file that you're looking at that you just downloaded is actually mine. So you might wonder, so what's the security bit about this? Well, if someone on a different computer tries to modify any of the VBA code in this file and saves it, Excel is going to automatically get rid of that signature as soon as it detects that that signature is not on the computer that's been modifying the VBA code.
Okay, anything else to add?
I think not. Otherwise, maybe the asker of the question could add an additional question about this.
We'll just jump on to the next question. I used to, so this is from Charlie. I used to install an add-in, and it cleared all buttons on my quick access toolbar, which is a bit annoying. Is it a risk when we install an add-in, or was it something the developer should be noted to avoid this issue?
Yeah, that is clearly an add-in developer who didn't really know his business.
Right.
You should not add code to an add-in that messes with the user interface of the user, other than maybe adding a tab to the, to the ribbon, or some items to the right-click menu or stuff like that. It's not a very good idea to start removing stuff that the user has actually added himself. I always try to make a point of trying to restore all of the settings of the user if I need to change any setting.
Okay. So our next question is from T. How can you avoid people breaking your add-in to see the code behind?
That is a good question.
Is that a big issue?
Well, for people commercially selling VBA add-ins, it is, because you can go into the VBA editor and let me open the VBA editor, share my screen.
Yeah, it should be live now.
So if you're in the VBA editor, you can go into tools and then the VBA project properties, and you can add protection to the project, and you can even add a password, and then only users who have access to the password can unprotect the VBA code. However, that password protection is relatively weak. I have a tool on my computer that takes literally 2 clicks to unprotect a password protected VBA code project. Now there is an application that makes this more difficult. It's called Unviewable Plus, and it has some trickery that disallows you from opening the VBA project altogether. So if I double click on my ref tree analyzer here, let me zoom in. If I double click here, because this is my developer version that's loaded in my Excel, it's going to ask for a password. But what happens with the version that I have online is if I double click it, it's going to tell you the project is unviewable. So you won't even be able to get at that password dialog. And even if you try to use that cracking tool that I also have, it will give you a VBA project that no longer works with garbled VBA code inside.
Oh, fantastic.
So yeah,
okay.
There are some measures to prevent people from breaking in, but they're not absolute, because there's always ways around them, like protection, really.
Okay. Next question, and this is a good one. Do you have any advice for intermediate Excel users if they want to start writing VBA or designing add-ins? And I guess how did you learn how to use these tools?
Well, I always say I started programming because I'm really lazy. As soon as I have to do things more than 2 times, I kind of start figuring, well, this should be something you can automate. But that being said, I have the mindset that I'd rather spend 2 hours figuring out how to do something in 10 seconds, which used to cost me 1 minute. But that at least taught me how to do VBA programming, how to do Office JavaScript programming, stuff like that. So yeah, it takes a rather big investment in getting to learn how VBA works, learning how Excel add-ins actually work behind the scenes. So what an add-in is precisely, and how you manage them, and what problems there are with them. Yeah, my best learning experience was to just put that add-in on a website for people to download and wait for their comments. Because that gives you feedback in a way that you would never have expected. Because, for example, people are using other language versions of Excel. And then you discover that certain items in your add-in don't necessarily work for other people because you hadn't thought of issues that might occur for others. For example, because they have an Excel file that is embedded in Word, and then when your add-in starts doing its work, it crashes Excel and Word altogether. So there's loads of very difficult and rare stuff that you need to cater for, which you only get to discover by just putting it out there and letting people use it.
Okay, fantastic. Interestingly, so the next presentation is actually on writing VBA code using ChatGPT. Before we get onto that, I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on the use of ChatGPT with writing VBA and designing add-ins, and if you had even tried that.
Well, of course I tried it. Who hasn't? But I tried it when I think the first version of ChatGPT was out, and I wasn't really ready to start paying for the most up-to-date one. So my experience is limited. So that's the, but I was surprised that it is quite capable, but you really need to know your business if you're using it, because it's going to churn out VBA code, but there's no way of telling whether the VBA code is actually correct. I've seen it produce utter nonsense, which doesn't even compile in Excel. So yeah, it can be a very useful tool, but it is still a requirement that you know your business, because otherwise you won't be able to detect where the flaws in the code are that ChatGPT produces.
The last question, what are your favorite tips that you'd like to share with everyone from Tao?
My favorite tips? Oh, you caught me there. I haven't prepared anything, but I think one of the most important tips I always show people is, if you're in Excel, remember to use Go to Special. I don't have a demo workbook here right now because you got me in the middle of it. But if you're in a workbook Excel and you have a bunch of numbers and formulas in here, which I don't because I didn't prepare, but hit that F5 button on your keyboard and then click that special box here button and have a look at what's here. It is really useful. Another way to get there is to click on the looking glass icon here and click Go to Special. There, Go to Special.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to stick around for that ChatGPT VBA session because I'm interested as well.